This time, our auditors, Drescher and Malecki, for their presentation. Come on up. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to see everyone.
All you have to do is say next slide. Just say next.
He hasn't aged a day now after all these years.
Thank you very much. Okay, great.
Next. That's all you gotta say. Next.
Thank you, Anne Marie.
You're welcome.
All right, so I have a PowerPoint presentation to share with the group. Matt Montalbo from Drescher Malecki. We do the county-wide audit. So we do the financial statement audit for the annual comprehensive financial report for the County of Sullivan, including your major funds, your enterprise fund. We'll talk through the audit results. We'll share some observations, and then we'll also go through some of your financial trends. So why don't we get into it? On the first slide, these are our required auditor communications. So essentially what we have to do is clarify what our responsibility is in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards. So our role really is to be an independent third party and to provide an opinion on your financial statements. So the clarification is that we don't take responsibility for the books and records. We don't prepare anything within the financial statements. We come in, we perform an audit and provide an opinion that your financials, your records fairly represent your financial position. So you can rely on those, that information in making budget decisions and making operational decisions as the board. It's also for submitting to other third parties, whether it be through bonding, state agencies, so that it provides you with an audited, reliable financial statement to send out. We did plan on moving forward with an unmodified opinion, so that is a clean opinion on the financial statements. We believe that your financial records fairly represent Sullivan County's financial position for the year ended December 31st, 2023. So the best you can do from an audit standpoint, we're never going to say that it is 100% accurate, because as an audit, we don't look at every single transaction, but we believe that it's fairly stated, no material misstatements. You can rely on these numbers. As far as your significant items, accounting policies, estimates, those are disclosed in the financial statements. So that goes through all your major accounting policies, your estimates. The most significant estimates are related to essentially your employee benefits, whether it be through the pension system or your other post-employment benefits, health insurance that you provide to retirees and active employees. Those are projected by actuaries, so ultimately those represent pretty significant liabilities, but you don't have to fund that entire liability in your budget. You pay as you go. But it is a disclosure. Those are the significant estimates. As far as independence, this is a requirement for the audit team, staff, all the way up to the partner level. We have to be free of conflicts of interest with the county. That's what allows us to be objective in performing the audit and then ultimately providing that opinion on the financial statement. And then as far as other matters, this would be where if we had any difficulties performing the audit, we would want to communicate that with this group. So if any department didn't provide documentation or told us you can't look at any of these records, we did not encounter any of those issues. We received full and open access to the books and records. We received full cooperation from all management and staff. So we do appreciate that. That's kind of my opportunity to thank everybody for allowing our access to everything and without any real interruption or difficulty. Any questions on those before we get into the financial statement update? Okay. All right. So if we could go to the first graph on page 1. So this is essentially a 5-year trend, your revenues versus your expenditures in the general fund. So what this does is...
Word out, 9:15.
Oh, sorry. Okay, good. This tells a little bit of a story for the last 5 years. And what I want to clarify is this is a very similar graph to what we're seeing at other New York State counties, where really coming out of the 2020 year, coming out of that kind of heavy pandemic period, once the economy started to pick up again, we saw sales tax and those revenues really kind of take off. So you can see 2021, 2022, you had pretty large surpluses in the general fund. For the year ended 2023, you did have an increase in your general fund of about $13.1 million. So that was the amount that your fund balance increased. But you can see that the blue line representing your revenues is starting to plateau a little bit as the expenditure line continues to rise. And that's what we're seeing.
It looks like a little dip, actually.
Even a little bit of a dip. Yeah, exactly. So the reason for this, 21-22, we saw really strong sales tax. We also are recognizing the federal revenues from the American Rescue Plan. So those are those one-time boosts to counties. So that was really the biggest reason for 21-22, those bigger surpluses. Not that we're going to see those going forward. So you can see that revenue line is really not keeping up that pace, but our expenses are still rising, and that's what we're seeing. Cost of everything, would it be employees, benefits, contractual costs, capital costs. So that is going to be a challenge going forward. So it's really good the last 4 years where you can see you've been able to generate an additional fund balance, and we'll talk through those on future slides. But we're starting to see that line narrow, and it's going to become more challenging from a budget perspective and operations going forward.
But you're saying that this is typical of other counties.
This is very consistent, yes, with other counties in New York State.
Thank you.
Yep.
So we're not special.
Well, what I see was going to start happening, and I've been talking about it, and we mentioned it different years about the money's coming in. You can see the decline, and our costs are going to be going up. So those in 24, I hope we don't crisscross those two lines.
Right. You want to have a balanced budget.
It's a big possibility with all the contracts coming up and expenditures. We have to really be cautious.
Yep, and that American Rescue Plan is that money is done at the end of 2024, and that
was the big rise.
That's part of it. Yep.
And then back in 19 and 20, we had the point of sale with the sales tax, which was a big plus. So that's all over with now.
Correct.
Yeah, but at the same time that I look at that in that sense and see how much we're not expending, but how much of that really reflects the amount of services that the county is providing to the residents of Sullivan County, because once we start providing those services that we have to provide the services, it's going to go high.
Sure.
Because our table of allowance of how we operate doesn't reflect that particular part right now at this moment. But
right, you're not at capacity yet.
You're not at capacity with the personnel, so we're not providing a real good service to the people of Sullivan County as they deserve, because we don't have the personnel, and that's why we're saving all this money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is going to be a challenge going forward.
It's going to be a big challenge.
Yep.
Okay.
And nobody here is getting younger and younger. We're getting older and older.
I'm getting younger. Look at this.
Yeah, I see that.
He didn't age a day, doesn't he?
You did point that out. Yeah, I wish that were true. Okay, can we go to the next slide?
Make it entertaining for you.
Okay, so this is essentially the result of that last slide. So our revenues exceeding expenditures for those fiscal years. This is your fund balance. So fund balance from 2022, the total fund balance was 74.1. It increased to 87.3, 2023. We show the components of fund balance, so the different restrictions or categories. Non-spendable being about $19.2 million, primarily the interfund loan with the nursing home. So we're saying that's not going to be received back by the county within the next fiscal year. There's some uncertainty of when that could be paid back. So it's shown as non-spendable. You have a restricted portion. These are your more legal reserves, restricted by law. You have the opioid settlement money in there, some hotel tax money in there. The committed fund balance is zero in 2023. That was a lot more of the solid waste commitments in the past. The assigned portion, which is the biggest portion right now. So these are more earmarked for specific purposes, so set aside, not totally unassigned and available. Primarily, the biggest piece there is essentially in accordance with your fund balance policy. You maintain about 2 months of your operating expenses. So this is what allows counties to operate on an ongoing basis, the best practice. So that's the biggest piece there. And then unassigned is about $17.7 million. So that's the only like truly available category that you have as far as cash flow. All right. Page 3.
So what was your opinion? What would you say about the way we have this set up with the numbers? It's solid?
Yeah, I do. And I think I'll speak to that a little bit in this graph as far as this is the unrestricted portion. So this includes everything but restricted and non-spendable. So it includes essentially money that you don't have to go through a legal action to release that money. So these are your assignments, your unassigned and committed. So the reason this is important because this is how you kind of compare to your total budget, like what you really have to work with. And so again, the best practices out there is to have a minimum of 2 months. So 28.2% is the level that you're at in unrestricted. So that puts you in a favorable position to handle those challenges that we kind of talked about on the prior slide. You wouldn't want to be going into these next fiscal years at 11.9%.
Right. But also having these numbers gives us a good bond rating too when people look at it.
Absolutely, favorable from outside third parties. Right. On page 4, this kind of compares you to some of the other counties in New York State, similar size, but there is a little bit of a variation. But what I would say is, for the most part, the counties, as of the end of 2023, from what I've seen and the numbers reported, right at anywhere from 18 to 35% is kind of where the majority of counties are lying right now. So being at 28.2, there's some counties that are upwards of 45%. So you can see that sales tax, that revenue trend, it's very consistent with other counties. Just there's some variation as far as
County B must have some cash cow sales tax, huh?
They've done okay. Yeah.
Good old Orange County.
It's not Orange County.
Okay. Oh, there's somebody better than them.
County B.
What's that?
It's County B.
It's County B.
We're not naming names here.
Well,
this is just for comparative purposes. Yes, thank you.
That's a cash cow.
Yep.
Let's not start any county wars, okay?
Yes. So you're an appropriate level at 28.2% within that range. So we'll move on, kind of talk a little bit about maybe some of the some financial challenges that we've talked about a little bit in the past. This is that due to the general fund from the care center. It does include all other funds as well. About 17 million in 22 and 23 represents the care center. So it didn't increase by that much. So we'll get into a little bit about
Brian out 923.
About the care center's operations. But this is essentially that non-spendable. This represents a lot of that non-spendable. So we can't really use that money because, yes, it's due to the general fund, but it's very uncertain whether that's going to be received just based on the activity and struggles of nursing homes.
What does it really represent?
The 18.5 million?
Yes.
So that represents essentially loans that the general fund has provided to different funds. Primarily about 17 million of that to the care center, the nursing home, which is an enterprise fund of the county. So that represents what is owed back to the general fund. So it's a loan versus a straight subsidy. So on your books, that is a receivable money that is intended to come back to the general fund. It's just uncertain that that's going to come back, at least within the next fiscal year.
So because it's an enterprise fund, it's treated differently. So we don't track other departments in this particular way.
No, you do. So,
Okay.
So this would be, due from your county road fund as well.
Okay.
So any loan that you provide to a different fund of the county, it's a little bit different from when you look at an enterprise fund because it is essentially set up kind of as a self-sustaining business type activity. That's kind of what in an enterprise fund, you're charging user charges for that service. Whereas, you look at different funds like the county road, that's mostly taxpayer dollars that are the intent to fund that fund.
Okay.
So do you have a list on your audit that where this money's going to?
Yes. Yeah, that is on your accounting records. You can see what funds owe what.
But out of this 18 million,
17.6 is the
adult care.
Yeah.
And is there a time period that 17 million has?
So that has grown over the last 5 years. In 2022, it was about 17.1.
Okay.
So not a huge increase in the last
Right.
year. But, and then I don't have prior to that, I would say the majority of these represent the care center. So in 19, it was probably more, around the 9 million, 8 million range, and then just under 10 million in 2020. And then these were the most difficult years for nursing homes, was 20 into 21. That's where you see the big increase.
Next.
Yep. All right, so this is a little bit more, I guess, on the positive side, where you look at your overall long-term debt, your serial bonds that you've issued to finance capital projects. So what this shows is you haven't issued anything new in 2023, so you've been able to finance your capital through whether it be operations. Certainly, the American Rescue Plan has helped in that.
That's the cookie jar theory.
Yeah.
That's the cookie jar theory.
I'm not familiar.
You ever heard of cookie jar theory?
No, I haven't.
Well, you take a nickel out of your piggy bank, you got to put a nickel back so you have the nickel for another day.
Yeah, sure.
So you don't spend what you don't have.
I like that. So your debt, your long-term debt decreased
It worked for me.
You
over
learn
the last
something new
5
with you
years.
every day, Joe.
Wouldn't that be the piggy bank
Yeah, why
variant?
is it
No,
cookie jar?
no,
No
the
piggy.
cookie jar. Okay.
Cookie jar.
Anyway,
So it's called the cookie jar, but we're taking nickels back into the.
Yeah.
We're talking about money, but we're talking about cookies. You got to put the cookie back and you have one the other day.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So the long-term debt was a little bit more than a nickel, though. So you were at 107 million at the end of 2023. But you've seen a decline in your debt. So that's obviously that allows you going forward to be you have a little bit more leverage as you look and plan future capital projects. Next slide, please. Okay, so just a little bit of a focus on the enterprise fund. We brought similar graphs back in March when we talked about the kind of the preliminary, but we didn't have the 2023 results. So being an enterprise fund, it's set up a little bit different. It's on what's called the full accrual basis. So it talks about net position versus fund balance. It brings in a lot of those long-term items that you don't necessarily see on the general fund side. So I want to kind of eliminate those. And so going to the next slide. What this does is it kind of takes out that long-term activity so we can assess it more on a current basis. So if you go one more, there it is. Okay, so this is just our current assets versus our current liabilities, kind of more of an estimated fund balance. So you can see how that has fluctuated over the last 5 years. Certainly, you're around a $16 million. Again, that's almost mirrors our due to the general fund. So we kind of know what that number
Could
is.
you explain this thoroughly so everybody can understand, please? Because we have a big issue with the nursing home, which people need to understand what's going on.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, I think, again, it's estimated fund balance because this isn't how your financials are set up to show this on a current basis. So that's why we took out all of that long-term activity because those aren't assets that are, going to be used in the current year that are liquid. Those aren't liabilities that you're going to pay in the current year. So we pulled all of those out to try to get more of what's our cash flow like, or what are our obligations in this current obligation. So you can see the care center in 2019 was more around 3 million.
Back in 929.
Or 2019, sorry, 3.1 million was the estimated, and you can see how that has grown over that difficult period of time for nursing homes. At the end of 2023, $16.2 million is kind of the estimated fund balance, or in this case, it's a deficit. So when you look at what that represents, a lot of that was fronted from the general fund. So how do you operate? So that money was fronted, that is due back to the general fund. That's the majority of kind of what this deficit represents.
Do you have revenues? Do you have revenues on this?
This is just a snapshot of your financial position, so it doesn't bring in revenues or expenditures.
And you don't know what
It's
you don't know how much the Medicare and Medicaid brought in against this number?
We can get that information to you.
I'd like to have
absolutely.
that, please.
Yeah, we can follow up with that. Another indicator, I want to look at the cash flows from operations because we'll kind of compare it to some other county nursing homes as well. You can see the really difficult years, 19, 20, 21. A little bit of, I would say, very good improvement in 22, but you're still running at about a $2.6 million cash loss from operations.
Could you explain cash flows from operating?
I will, yes,
What
yes.
is that actually?
So that is basically the amount of cash that is generated from strictly operating revenues and operating expenses. So really just the cost of, those Medicare, Medicaid, those revenues coming in to provide
Those
the
reimbursements.
services. Yes. Yep. It doesn't include IGT. So, and it doesn't include kind of those, the more federal one-time revenues. So those have helped. And that's really how the nursing homes, county-run nursing homes are set up. They're really, right now, they're having difficulty operating and generating cash flows from operations. They do rely on IGT to kind of fill that gap that hasn't totally filled that gap.
In your experience, do you see private companies doing a better job with funding and keeping them afloat?
It's a tough statement that I probably don't have enough experience to make that call with nursing homes. But what I can say is when you start to look at where you were in 19, 20, and 21 compared to when you kind of took this different model, I mean, there has been improvement in 22 and 23. That's just kind of reading the numbers, but I wouldn't feel comfortable making any.
Okay, I understand.
So I may ask a question. Yep. So you mentioned some of the challenges for county-run nursing homes.
Yep.
When you were gathering that information, how many counties in New York are currently running nursing homes?
I don't know the exact number.
Just an approximation.
I would say in the 10 to 20 range.
Okay.
Is what I would say.
And has that changed?
That is declined. That's decreased a lot from, you could probably do a snapshot of like 10 years ago, 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And you would definitely see a pretty significant decline from at least 10 years ago. And, there's been a lot of nursing homes that have either, county run that have either closed, have taken a different model, have sold, different methods.
I
Yeah.
understand. Thank
Yep.
you.
So I just have a question. So the current liabilities that have increased up to 20 million from 19 to 23, what would be specifically causing that increase?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's really essentially the running at a loss, because what that is again, that's the loan from the general fund. So the general fund had to advance, we're at $17.1 million. So 17.1 of that is the amount due to the general fund.
All right.
So it's yeah.
So you're saying from 22 to 23 was, like, say, a $2 million difference. Going forward for 24, you're probably looking at about 18 million then, if not more, with the inflation rate.
But this would include
Yeah,
staffing? This would include staffing?
Yeah, I mean, this includes everything.
Everything.
This is
Everything.
the full operation.
Right. So the reason I'm asking the question is because, you're not essentially looking to make money from running a nursing home, right? You're providing a service. So there is a cost to that service.
Absolutely.
The $2.5 million could be that cost to providing the service. However, the sour side of this is the money's due back to that revolving general fund.
Yeah, and I think more so than that, because obviously that grew a lot in the 2019, 2020, 2021 years. Mm-hmm. So if you look at the last 2 years, I think the more important indicator is kind of what you're saying. This cash flow from operation is we're running a cash flow operating loss of about $2.6 million every year. So how do we plug that hole?
Right.
And that's kind of the decision that the county has, right? And every other county that runs a nursing home.
Right. So
do we help plug that hole? IGT can provide a factor of that, but it is running at a cash flow loss, and that's consistent with other.
So,
nursing homes.
and as services do cost money, whether or not that number, and that's for the discussion of the legislature of what that number should be.
Sure.
But we're behind the 8 ball because of the 16 million. That's what's making
Absolutely.
Okay.
And we can all
That
agree
makes it more
that it was a
difficult.
global pandemic that created situations, that
Right.
created that.
It made it more challenging. I
Made
mean,
it more
even
challenging.
prior to that, nursing homes were having difficulty.
Right.
And again, there's so many different factors as far as a
Right.
county nursing home and the ability to run that. So
But we can all agree that a global pandemic did not
No,
do
you
any
can't
favors.
say that, because in 19 and 20, when the pandemic was really blown out, it wasn't as bad as it is today.
What?
on the fund balance line.
But
That's where the
But that's
cost came
accrued.
from.
that's
So you're.
accrued.
I mean, it's always been a challenge. And I think, certainly that pandemic period caused additional challenges for every type of entity. But, so I want to bring in the comparison a little bit on the next slide too. So these are some other county-run nursing homes throughout New York State. We brought this back in March. And you can see the difficulties, it's not just in the pandemic period. Some of them were running a little bit better in 2019, and then, it did impact through that period. But what it shows in the most recent years is, again, similar challenge to Sullivan County. There is a cash flow loss from operations. So how do we plug that difference?
And all these comparisons are county-run nursing homes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And again, of varying sizes. So, the amount it's all in context with how big the nursing home is. But I think, again, the point is what we're trying to get to is we know that these nursing homes are running a cash flow loss. If this is a service that the county wants to provide, there's got to be some decisions on how that is made up. And that's the facts from the number side. All right.
Next.
Yep. All right. So we'll kind of conclude with overall observations. When I look at we did the county fund balance trends, the future outlook. We talked a little bit about where those trends are kind of heading and how those could present some challenges. A big observation for counties right now in the public sector is staffing. I'm sure you're having a lot of those discussions where you have, whether it be retirements or employees that have a lot of knowledge and experience in a particular department, that walks away and it becomes a big problem sometimes, not only from an operation standpoint, but from a risk internal controls from like an audit standpoint. And we look at, all right, are all those approvals happening, those reviews that always happened? Does the new individual, are they properly trained? So that's where you can see some errors. That is a big risk for governments right now because there's a lot of movement. So that's kind of like a multi-layered issue. And then we talked a lot about the nursing home observations. And then as far as other best practices, we kind of always have to put something in about IT, cybersecurity. Obviously, that's a gigantic issue that we're seeing even most recently. So you can never be there can never be too much investment into that cybersecurity side and keeping up to date with, the different changes and tools out there. I know your county is very involved on the state level as well in IT. So that would just say stay vigorous in that area. And then finally, some of the other reports that we provide, we also do a federal compliance audit on your federal dollars. So it's called the single audit. We are almost wrapped up with that. To date, we do not have any compliance findings. So that's when you look at the different programs that you provide, those are able to continue because you're in compliance. So that is an important area to have that kind of a clean opinion on the federal compliance side. Any other questions or concerns?
Yeah, I just have one on this, going back to the care center, just to have a better understanding. So cash flow from operating, and then we have the next slide that shows the other 4 countywide nursing homes, right?
Yep.
Is there any other instances of how we're set up here with a vendor running our nursing homes as opposed to these? Because, so in theory, yes, we're showing an operating loss of $2.6 million, but we're not taking into consideration the funds that would be expended if this was solely county run.
Right. These other ones are solely county run. Right. Yeah. It's pretty unique to kind of be in this middle situation, we'll say.
Right.
Yeah.
So is it safe to say that when we're operating at closer to the $9 million operating loss, that we would be in that general vicinity if we take into consideration county procurement, staffing, et cetera?
I don't know. That would be a tough tough for me to say that, that particular number.
And
Because again, there's a lot of, these are different size entities.
Okay.
So there's other factors there. So and that could be an exercise as far as, kind of trying to capture that additional cost.
Okay.
And 2021, there's also the COVID factor is still happening, but what do you mean by staffing? Because we're still paying for everything. The consultant isn't paying for anything. The county still pays for everything, whether it's staffing agencies. I think they've bought some things, but I think things are coming through the county procurement still, most things.
Yeah, it's just whether it be instead of paying payroll, it's paying contractual costs for their individuals to help run different. Yeah, so I think it's somewhat close to a similar as far as the number of costs in the different areas, but it's tough to compare what it would be like under the different scenarios. Yeah, we're doing a financial statement audit, so a lot of it is again we're verifying that the numbers that are in the records are reliable. Versus the trends are you can kind of draw your own conclusions. But
Anybody else have any questions? No? Thank you very much. It was
Okay.
very informative.
thank you.
Nice to see you again.
Good to see everyone. Thank you.